So how dangerous is lifting heavy? So some might say that training 5 days of jiu-jitsu is inherently dangerous. And like most things, it really depends. If you've already been training 4-5 times a week, training 5 straight days may not be that significant for you. But if we're somebody that's taken an extended period of time off, 5 straight days might be excessive. And the same holds true for different loads or exercises in the weight room. There's nothing inherently dangerous about lifting 300 pounds, especially if you've been working up to that weight over time. Or if you're significantly stronger than that, and that's maybe a warm-up. The thing that we really want to draw attention to is rate of change. If we haven't been lifting, even if we've established a pretty high degree of strength in the past, jumping straight to 300 pounds may be dangerous at that point in time. But if we've worked up to it slowly and over time, there's nothing inherently dangerous about it. We've proven to our body that it can handle that sort of stress. And that's no different whether it's lifting 300 pounds, running 10 miles, or training 5 sessions of jiu-jitsu throughout the course of 1 week. So we really just want to be aware of doing too much too fast. And especially when we're over 40 and our recovery may be a little bit different than it's been in prior years, we want to make sure that we are slowly increasing the training stress, whether it's on the mats or in the weight room. And the last thing I want to draw attention to is that rate of change is the variable that best predicts pain or injury. There's no way that we can 100% predict pain and injury, but to again use the example of 5 days straight of jiu-jitsu, if we haven't been training, there's a pretty good chance that we'll be feeling some aches and pains throughout the course of those 5 days. So just make sure that as we add in any variable, whether it's an additional training day on the mats or a little bit of new strength training, that we do so slowly and incrementally. So one of the most common questions that I get is, won't lifting make me less flexible? Short answer is no. The long answer is that if you prioritize range of motion in the weight room, you can actually get more mobile and flexible from strength training. Let's get into a couple examples as to how exactly we can do that. Deficit exercises, like this deficit Bulgarian split squat, are a great way to improve mobility as we build strength. So if you check out the joint angles that are present here, and you were to just invert my body, these are joint angles that apply specifically to a lot of positions in jiu-jitsu, like playing guard. Dumbbell exercises are another great way to emphasize range of motion. Not only will this help keep the upper body mobile, but it'll allow you to produce force from very sharp joint angles, just like you do when you frame in jiu-jitsu. But don't we get weaker as we get older? It's kind of a complex question. To oversimplify it, as we age, we do certainly get weaker, but it's definitely worth noting that strength, compared to other variables, peaks much later in life. A lot of powerlifters are able to post lifetime PRs well into their 40s. So let's draw a little bit of a distinction that might make a lot of sense based on observations that we've had in the past. Strength can absolutely increase well after the age of 40. But something that we've noticed is that power or explosiveness tends to slope off after the age of 30. And that's where some of that conventional wisdom comes in terms of athletes being old after they've hit 30. Particularly in sports that require explosiveness, you'll notice performance decrease at that point. But explosiveness or power is made up of both force production and velocity. And some of the greatest changes that occur are in velocity in particular. So to combat that, we want to establish a couple safe ways to train power or velocity. So despite the fact that velocity and power decrease after the age of 30, there's some very safe ways that we can train it. But by far, the most important thing is that we focus on our landing and how we absorb the force from the ground as we encounter it again. Outside of power, strength is extremely trainable. It's by far the most trainable attribute of the human body, especially if we haven't been training strength up until this point. Something that we want to keep in mind, especially if we're training for jiu-jitsu, is our minimum effective dose. And this is something that I don't think is talked about quite enough. We want to try to establish the minimum amount of work we can do in the weight room to really see long-term change and really stick to that point or something close to it so that we are managing fatigue and able to put much more of our effort into that mat time. One really good way to do that is to do full body training sessions. If you train just legs or just arms in a single session, you might find it really hard to do a more well-rounded activity like jiu-jitsu. So we definitely want to make sure that every session has a well-rounded array of movement patterns like squat, hinge, upper body push, pull, and lunges. The last thing we want to touch on in terms of strength is isometric strength. If we were to make a Venn diagram between mat strength and old man strength, the overlap in the middle would be isometric strength. Now, earlier in the video, we went over isometric exercises that are useful for managing pain, but there's very specific ones that we can perform to improve our performance in jiu-jitsu. Let's look at a couple examples here. So not only are low-grade isometrics useful for pain and injury management, but much more difficult isometrics can be useful to improve performance on the mats and really develop that mat strength, things that are associated with being able to hold onto and finish submissions and solidify dominant positions that you get to. And these really come down to two types of isometrics. The first kind is overcoming isometrics, which are isometrics performed against an immovable object. A great example here is the mid-thigh pull. So we perform essentially a deadlift motion against bailout bars and pull at the mid-thigh into an immovable object. We'll generally aim to hold this position for anywhere from 8 to 12 seconds. The other type of isometrics that we want to train in the weight room are yielding isometrics, ones where we purposefully hold a specific position against tension. One of the best examples of this is the pull-up iso hold. This is a great exercise to not only develop isometric strength and therefore translate to mat strength, but to also have it be relative to your body weight. And it's pretty simple. All you do is get your chin above the bar and hold it there for as long as you can. And the last quick section that I want to touch on is recovery. It might be an inconvenient truth, but 98% of all of our recovery comes down to proper sleep and adequate nutrition to fuel us for our activity. If we have these things dialed in and we're still feeling like we're not recovering from the activity that we're putting ourselves through, we want to make sure that we're managing our training load. And there's a few ways that we can go about this. The first way is looking at that minimum effective dose in the weight room. We might be surprised that decreasing our total number of sets, but keeping effort level high, allows us to see consistent progress while having shorter sessions that we can more easily recover from. But managing load also applies to training jiu-jitsu. You might be surprised to find that replacing a day with live sparring with more purposeful, intentful drilling pays huge dividends. We can still work on skill acquisition without burning ourselves out and feeling like we got crushed from another hard sparring session. This is even more true if we're able to film our drilling or live rounds. Reviewing training sessions after the fact allows for more complete skill acquisition and allows us to identify any faulty parts of our decision making while we're training. So filming allows us to still develop the mind without further breaking down the body. So I understand we went over a lot today, and preparation for something as complex as jiu-jitsu can be a little bit confusing. That's why I've made it my mission to offer a service like Team EP that allows me to do the thinking for you off the mats. It allows us to train and emphasize range of motion, determine what our minimum effective dose is, and really push for long-term progress, not just in terms of performance, but in terms of resilience and our ability to prevent or mitigate injury. So if that sounds like something useful to you, check out the link down below and be sure to subscribe, like the video, and share it with somebody who could use it. See you next time or whatever. Get out of here.